Welcome back, everybody. Matt Goes to the Movies here with another episode, and this time we are talking about the start of the brand new DCU universe, and that is Superman. Now, Rob, clearly one of the most recognizable comic book characters in history, a role that has been played by many. And again, like I said, the start of a brand new universe, which I have a lot of thoughts on, and I'm sure you will too. But y- you know, this is by James Gunn. This guy has control of everything. I have some thoughts on that and some of the things that have already come before this, and I think that's a key to this conversation that we're going to have. But this is the second time I have seen this movie, and the first time for you. So my initial questions are: where do you think this starts for the DCU?
That's a fantastic question. And it's one that I've literally been asking myself basically since this movie got announced and DC announced they were also rebooting their whole cinematic universe. And I think it's an interesting choice because Superman is, like you said, one of the most recognizable, most iconic characters. And you'll notice I didn't say comic book characters. I'm just saying characters in all of fiction and all of literature, anything that has ever been created. That Superman logo is among the most recognizable that is out there. And he is one of the most important, most recognizable characters. Where I think it was an interesting choice is that if you're going to try to just do box office, you do it around Batman. Like you do it around somebody like that. Or you cast a major star as Superman. So that's the draw. For all the Superman tattoos that people out there have and things like that, I'm not necessarily convinced that Superman himself, that character, is the draw in 2025 that some of these other characters might be. So when this was announced, I was like, that's a very curious choice that you're rebuilding on him, as opposed to maybe somebody who's guaranteed to do a little more box office. That you're not going with Robert Pattinson's Batman and using that as your jumping off point. That was always curious to me. And a guy like James Gunn, that certainly his Guardians of the Galaxy films were largely beloved by all. The second one, neither of us particularly care for, but it's got its moments. But that first one really redefined a lot of things about superhero films, and him as your shepherd of the whole connected universe, I thought was also an interesting choice. I didn't necessarily see him as that guy, but to me, watching this film, okay, yeah, I'm in. We'll really get into it, but I, for one, am interested to see what a James Gunn led DC cinematic universe turns into.
Yeah, I think he's laid a good enough groundwork. And realistically, if you want to get very technical, because pretty much all of it is almost canon, except for he changed the ending. And I don't know if you've watched anything from Peacemaker season 2, but the Suicide Squad almost really kind of is the beginning of this universe, even though I think essentially this really kind of takes place around the same time frame. Um, but I think he's laid some good groundwork. I do think there are, for as much hate as Man of Steel had gotten, and I think and it's always like this though, but like some of the hate that Henry Cavill got for playing Superman, and then when it was found he wasn't going to be, all of a sudden everybody loves him, and oh my God, how could you ever replace him? Things like that. Um, I do think that there are some pretty strong issues with this movie. Just like there was with Man of Steel. And although I think this is a good jumping off point, one of my things that I will be curious about, because what I was looking for, and it's certainly a different universe than what Zack Snyder had. And it's certainly a kind of a different way to portray Superman than what we just got with the DCEU. But I wasn't blown away by his performance. And that's David Corner's Sweet. Um, I don't think I don't think he's any better. And that's one of the things that like kind of pulled me out of this on a second rewatch was I don't think this is any more inherently better than Man of Steel, having recently just seen that as well. I think this movie really falls apart towards the third act. I think it slows down to almost a crawl to the point when I first saw it, I went, oh God, like, wow. Because up until about where Superman, and we'll talk about it more, kind of, gets taken out of this movie for a little bit, so to speak, I was really engaged. I thought James Gunn did a very good job. And then, like I said, going towards that third act of the movie, I thought this thing came to a crashing and staggering halt, um, which really caused me some concern. Now, I do think by the ending, he managed to get it back. But it did give me some cause for some concern here. Um, and it's just one movie, but there were some glaring issues to me with this. Now, one thing I will say is I do really, really love the fact that we don't need an actual origin story.
Yes.
I do like the fact like that he is established in this world pretty well. It's what, 3 years that he's been around?
Yeah, so that's actually something that I really took note of. This movie starts off with several titles that are put on screen, telling it's been 3,000 days. So the things that this does is it really sets up that yes, there are metahumans that are out there. They've been around for this long. Humanity's been around this long. Superman crashed on Earth this many years ago, and he showed himself to the public for the last 3 years. I really thought that was a very interesting choice and kind of a bolder choice to kick it off. And what I have to say, seeing how this works, and I've seen this once, so maybe on a rewatch I might feel differently as it seems like your second watch gave you a very different experience than your first. But having seen this, and now having also, we've had Tom Holland's version of Spider-Man around for a while. I'm really convinced that I never need to see an origin story again for a superhero who we've already seen multiple variations of on screen. I never need to see Uncle Ben die again. I never need to see Thomas or Martha Wayne die ever again. I never need it again. Like when you look at this and how well this starts, and how we don't necessarily need to see him growing up in Smallville. We don't need to see Ma and Pa Kent like raising him as a boy and explaining to him how he can't just be on the football team and taking everybody out and like all of that. He's already on the job. And that's one of the things that sometimes slows superhero stories down is trying to slog through that origin story a little bit. I didn't feel like we missed anything by that not being included here. He's freaking Superman. We know who he is. We know the bit. We know all about him. I kind of like that this movie said, look, we know you know who he is. We don't need to tell you who he is. Here's some superheroes punching each other in the face. We'll just give you what you want.
Yeah, I do like that. One thing I want to point out too is I will give credit for the costume because one of the big things was we've gotten away from the tights, the tights with the underwear, things like that. But I do think this costume is probably the best interpretation of this version of Superman.
Mm.
I think it looks better than the version in Superman Returns. I you know, I think it looks better as much as people want to say. Um, it looks better than Christopher Reeves. I think this is the best version of this outfit that we've seen on screen. And that goes to the Arrowverse and everything like that. Um, I do give him credit because I really think that in for whatever reason, this universe, whatever you want to say, this outfit works. I think he looks fantastic in the suit. I think that's a very, very strong point of this movie is that he looks great in costume. I will give him
And I
that.
kind of looked at the choice to do the red trunks as kind of being, it just fits the theme of this overall film. Where, because like, what's the point of that? Like, he puts his pants on and then he puts another set of red trunks over top. Like, why? What's that about? It's obviously a, it's an art decision that was made for the comics way back in the day, and it's just been his iconic look. So because it serves no purpose, it doesn't do anything. So the fact that like it's just this goofy kind of look, like if you actually think about Superman having to pull those on after he's already got his pants on, like it's just kind of silly and it's kind of goofy. It's a little bit. It's just kind of not entirely serious. And to me, I felt like a lot of this movie was that. It was one of the things that I think overall about this movie, and I sort of see the costume as again a piece of that, where parts of this movie were very funny, but at no point did I feel like this movie crossed the line between funny and goofy or funny and silly. Like we didn't have a Thor Love and Thunder moment in this movie to me where it was like, okay, that's just ridiculous. Like get the hell out of here with that nonsense. Like there were legitimately funny parts that I laughed out loud, and it never felt like this. Even with Lex being, and I loved the interpretation of Lex Luthor in this. Um, I never felt like this movie took itself entirely too seriously for any long periods of time, where it wasn't just kind of fun. And that's just sort of how I interpret the costume, is sort of through that same lens. Like, yeah, of course they would do that version of it if this is how they're presenting the movie. Am I making any sense on that?
Yeah, no, I think you're making total sense. And yeah, I thought Nicholas Holt was fantastic. I can't wait to see more of him. I like Nicholas Holt a lot. I think he's very, very good.
Can we talk about
Um,
how badass it was when
and,
he's
and
walking through Antarctica, just pops up and he's just strolling? Where do you get those sunglasses? I want a pair of those sunglasses. I want the sunglasses. I want the coat. The whole thing was just so badass because dude is freezing without a hat on. He's got a bald head and it is Antarctica, and he's
Mhm.
got no hat on and he's just strolling because he doesn't care. It was so badass. I love that bit.
Yeah, no, I thought that was really good. I thought the CGI was, that's one of the areas where I thought the CGI was lacking a little was some of those
Mm.
fights inside the Fortress of Solitude, especially when they hack into the computer. I thought that was a little much. I was like, what are we doing here? But I will say one thing that I will say is a standout in this movie for me. Above all else, above the action, above the costume. And I was hoping for maybe a little bit more after this. But that scene where Superman is getting interviewed by Lois
Mm.
Lane, and it's just the two of them, because spoiler alert, folks, they're together. Um, that scene is amazing. That is to me probably one of the best examples of what maybe it would be like to be this person. To know that you could do the right thing to help someone and still maybe get ridiculed or questioned or say that that's not your place. That scene I thought was absolutely incredible. Um, I thought he showed a huge range in that scene, and it really was like I was absolutely glued during that. And when he just kind of lets out that like that primal just yell, people were going to die. eh, That's it's fantastic. I really thought in that moment, like Gunn was able to capture with the script, like what it would be like to be Superman and to just know that basically you could do anything. Um, but maybe you're not supposed to.
It was one of my favorite scenes of the movie, and frankly, it's one of my favorite scenes that I can think of in all of superhero films. Like it's we've never seen anything like this before, and that's what I love so much about it. Where doing the right thing is sometimes the wrong thing, or can be interpreted as the wrong thing. It was so interesting to me. I was just like you. I was glued to my screen. I was like, if my house was on fire, I wouldn't leave right now. Like I need to see how this ends, and I almost wish we could have gotten a little bit more of that. I mean, they did play with some of those themes a little bit more, but when you think about the character of Superman, one of the problems that writers have when working with him is that yes, we're all aware that kryptonite is his, that's his Achilles heel is this one thing. And I think magic kind of no, actually I think he is immune to magic. I don't even remember. They kind of turned some of that stuff on and off. But the, you really like he's invulnerable. He's super fast, he can fly, he's super strong, he can do everything. So in terms of putting him in peril, it's really tough to put him in peril, like without weird kryptonite just showing up all the time. So the way that writers typically try to create drama, create tension when you're writing a Superman story is you have to put those around him into peril. He has to always be saving Jimmy Olsen. He always has to be saving Lois, or it's something where it's, threatening the entire world. And he's the only one that can stop it, and he can't be everywhere at once. The other way that they sometimes really create that drama is by working with his secret identity and having to threaten that his secret identity will be found out, which by the way, like 4 or 5 years ago, I think he just announced to the world that he was Clark Kent. I don't know if they're still doing that in the comics or not. I haven't picked one up in a while, but at one point he just announced to the world like, hey, I'm Clark Kent. And that was kind of an interesting bit for a little bit, so they kind of got rid of that. But that this was where I think Superman as a character becomes as fascinating as you can possibly imagine, because he has the ability to stop an invasion. He has the ability to halt a war where innocent people absolutely would have died, millions would have suffered. Um, and he did it, but he was being criticized for it because he's not a diplomat, and who gives him the authority? Like all of these moral and ethical questions that that book series that I love, that I've recommended before, the And Philosophy series, where it looks at all the pop culture references and like writes whole essays on these things. Like you could absolutely delve right into an essay on that whole idea, and it would be fascinating. That to me, I was like, I love where they're going with this. Because that's the way you make Superman interesting. Otherwise, he can be boring at times because he's impervious to everything. He can do everything. His powers are everything.
Yes, exactly. And I do, again, I will say one of the things that I will give this movie credit for is they did manage to make me go, okay, I believe what's going on in this story. I'm interested to see him doing these, events, these heroic things, fighting. Um, and it didn't just feel mundane, like he would automatically win. Now, again, like, do you know he's going to? Yeah. Like, no offense here. I'm not trying to throw shade, but like, you're not going to kill him in his first movie slash second movie, Batman v Superman. Like, you're not going to do that. Um, but like you said, you also know that he's pretty much impervious to almost everything, but still, they made these things believable, and they made it so, again, Lex is incredibly smart, and you know, getting data and doing all of these things to make sure that he would be able to, have someone that would successfully be able to fight Superman. I thought that was done very well in this movie too. I thought, yeah, I believe these fights going on. I believe that there is a struggle. I believe that he is hurt. I did enjoy that.
Yeah, I think overall the visual effects I think were pretty solid throughout this. I really struggled at times to notice what sometimes I thought something was practical or was like a real person or was even Crypto the dog. I was at times I was like, is that real or is that not real? Like, it was actually really tough to tell. I was really impressed. I actually think the most impressive visual effects work were the lantern constructs, and those were incredible. Those were so well done. Um, I thought, like, give me so much more of these, especially when Nathan Fillion's throwing the middle finger constructs just out of the ground to blow up the tanks towards the end of the movie. That was that was fantastic. I loved those parts, and the contracts in general. Like I said, so well done. Was probably my favorite visual effect of the whole film.
Yeah, no, I thought he was very well done as well. Again, like having them be part of this universe, it was all very well done. I did like
But
all
that
of
was also
that.
incredibly risky
Um,
because you had kind of talked about this a little bit earlier
yes.
in that there is a good bit of this movie that is not Superman and are brand new characters that had to be introduced. And I immediately, when they said, "Oh yeah, we're going to get Mr. Terrific and you're going to get Guy Gardner and you're going to get all of this," and I'm like, what, like, give us a Superman movie first before you start trying to introduce all these other characters. And the first thing I immediately thought of, and if anybody's listened to who's listening now did listen to our Batman v Superman review, which you should do that, by the way. We had some fun on that one. The one of the major problems that that movie had was you were introducing way too much. You were introducing Doomsday, a new Batman, a new Wonder Woman. There were several other characters that were being introduced and trying to be set up and trying to do way too much all at once. It was trying to tell 14 different stories and didn't really tell any of them particularly well. And that's really where that movie fell apart. And to me, in my head, I'm going, okay, you're really kind of trying to use this film to boot this whole new connected universe together. We don't know who Superman, we don't know who this guy is. Like, most people have never heard of him before, and he's going to be leading your franchise. And then you're also going to introduce not even the most popular Green Lantern, the one that everybody knows, in Hal Jordan or even John Stewart. Like, you're not giving those ones. Like, we like Nathan Fillion, sure, like he's funny, like he's definitely got nerd cred, but Mr. Terrific is kind of a deep cut. Like, unless you're a comic nerd, that's not one you're gonna really recognize. And maybe that was a fan kind of courtesy. But that was incredibly risky, and Hawk Girl as well, which not a super deep cut, but also like not one of the core Justice League members that everybody would recognize. Like, we're not talking Wonder Woman, we're not talking Cyborg, like we're not talking Martian Manhunter. Like, there's definitely more recognizable Justice League members that you could have picked, and definitely not Batman. Um, so I think it was really risky, especially with the track record that DC films have had, to go the route they did. I think it worked. I'm thinking you're going to say you disagree.
No, I think it worked, and here's the reason why I think it worked is because yes, like Green Lantern, okay, but again, most people, the average person is going to go Hal Jordan.
Yeah.
I think this works because you're not introducing major characters and almost treating them like side characters. And even though this group has obviously a big effect on this world and they're a major part of it, they are still side characters. So I think I didn't care that there's all of these people in here because you're not trying to just shove, the Batman or Wonder Woman or Flash in here just to go, oh, well, we need to catch up. Like, this has nothing to catch up
Mm.
to. And I think that's one of the things that I like that James Gunn is doing is it does seem like he's going to do his own thing. He's not going to try and catch up. Like, and you could argue that you don't have to catch up to them anymore because of the fact that, you know, they have it's funny to say that they've fallen so far when, 500, $600 million are considered like failures compared to what Marvel used to make. Like, it's a funny world that we live in now like that. But he doesn't see, he's okay, this is what it's going to take. If I don't like a script, we're not going to put the movie into production. He's actually canceled projects already that he himself confirmed they were working on and then came out and said, look, we could not get a script right. Maybe we revisit it down the line, but it's not going to hold up other things that are working just because I said we were going to do it. I respect that. For now, I respect the fact that the studio's allowing him to do that. They are letting him control this. Um, that's why with the flaws that this movie does have, I still have hope because it does seem like he does have a vision and they're going to let him do that. I mean, you think about all the stories of studio interference and things that happen to these projects that just go and now they're dead. For a studio to sit there and let this guy go, yeah, no, this movie's done. Like, we're cutting this script, we're not going to do it. It's very rare. So I think that's why this works in this movie for me is because again, it's not shoehorned, and I feel like yeah, you can have these people in this universe, um, and let's see how other characters come in, how they're introduced, or what they have been doing. Why weren't they a part of this first experience? I am actually going to give him trust that he's going to bring that in accordingly.
The thing that really, thinking about the future of this franchise, one of the things that kind of surprised me was at no point do they ever say the words Justice League. They continue to say Justice Gang. They're obviously still workshopping it. It doesn't seem like they're really sold, other than Guy Gardner. Nobody seems really sold on it. And I just thought for sure by the end of the movie, somebody would call it the Justice League, and that would be what they would move on. But they didn't. And I did that surprise you?
Um, Again, no, I don't think it did because of the fact that based on hearing him talk, again, I think that he's taking the road that he wants to take. So I didn't feel like it would be rushed because to me it wouldn't make sense in the interviews and the things that I have seen him say. Um so I never had any kind of doubt that that might happen just because again, like I feel he's been very true to his word with what he's going to do.
And that's probably something I need to get used to more with James Gunn, is that as soon as you think he's going to zig, he zags. And that's really been kind of what he's done a lot of throughout his last several years of filmmaking. So perhaps I was anticipating him going the more conventional filmmaking route when I should have known better.
Yeah, I think he showed some pretty good world building skills here. Certainly for people who have watched Peacemaker. I won't spoil anything here, except for he certainly tied things together. Like, you fully well know that Peacemaker is a part of this universe. Rob, have you seen anything from season 2 yet?
Not yet. And I enjoyed his character so much in the Suicide Squad that it was always something that I wanted to check out the separate show. But it was never something where it never seemed imperative that I needed to. So it got itself moved to the bottom of the queue of other stuff that I'm behind on.
Yeah, I think season 2 here, especially with some of the things that have happened, season 2 I think is essential to see what's going on in this universe, because I do believe, and he has said this himself, and I think in a big way, but it so far doesn't feel forced, that season 2 is going to lead into the next Superman movie. But it doesn't feel like Marvel feels right now. Well, like Marvel felt, where you're overloading. These shows are really made for no reason. Um, this feels like it should be watched instead of has to be watched.
Mm.
And that's another thing that I'll give him credit for.
So definitely credit to Gunn for a lot of things. If I am going to do some critique, one of the things that I wish he would have left behind when he exited the MCU permanently was the hero fighting a villain with the same power set trope that was a plague on much of the MCU. We get to the end of this film, and Superman is fighting Ultraman, who is just a clone of him. Um, and I wish they would have done something different with that. I'm still waiting for somebody to do the whole Forever Evil story in some way and do it right, which was a great run. Probably, I would say it might be the most iconic story of the New 52. Like when you go back to like that those years that DC ran the New 52, I think the Crime Syndicate and the Forever Evil storyline, that was a huge story. It was like a long period of time, and it was like their whole line was involved in that story. I'd love for somebody to do it and do it right. I mean, we kind of got it in like the Lego DC Supervillains game, which was sort of fun, but I'd like to see a serious take on it, and that's already done. Like we can't do Ultraman now. We can't really do the Crime Syndicate or anything like that. Um, but it just, I don't know, like, and part of it goes back to what I said earlier about how Superman is kind of tough as a character because he's invulnerable to everything, just about. Um, but having him fight a clone of himself, I don't know, that was a bit of a letdown to me.
Well, and again, I think that's where this movie kind of falls apart for me, is that last bit when he's trapped in that dimension. Um, I don't. I think this movie really crawls, like it almost crashes to a halt, and I don't think anything in those particular scenes is that great. I mean, yes, that person that helped Superman up out of the crater, that was done. That like I thought that was a very good scene, but him going back home to the farm, I have to say, I think Ma and Pa Kent, I think they're the weakest
Mm.
interpretation that I've seen, and I know they have a very limited time. Um,
They came
I
across as
think they're a
simpletons.
very yeah, and here's the thing, and I hope I articulate this well enough. Eh, You look at the other interpretations, Kevin Costner and things like that, of these characters, and man, like I know maybe maybe that's his point, like just two very average people having to deal with this extraordinarily above average person and raising him to be a good person. But they just like these two people have no screen presence
Mm.
whatsoever. Um, I don't think they fit into a scene with this. Like they seem like the characters that would be his parents in the Arrowverse on the CW. They don't seem like major motion picture actors and actresses. And that that's just my opinion. That's nothing to say about them personally. It's just they don't feel like they fit here.
I, it's funny. I needed you to say that for me to kind of understand what about those scenes just like kind of didn't sit right with me. And they do feel like they're not from the same movie, is really what it is. Like they come across as very simple people, which is fine, nothing wrong with that. But like there was something just overly down home farm country, like excessively so, like almost caricatures of like that Kansas farmer stereotype. That just kind of felt like, how did how does how does any of this work? Like, so I definitely am picking up what you're throwing down.
Yeah, and like I said, just those scenes. I do think the the portal being open, causing the split. I even found those pieces of the movie to not be that entertaining. There's some weird cuts there. Um, it felt like the earthquake kind of took its time because it started and it's like I think the line was like it'll be to the city, and then it's like it stopped overnight because he gets captured and there's a whole night to day transition, and it's not just like it's not first thing in the morning. Like it seems like a whole like 12 hours has passed, and like all of a sudden this thing is like now just getting like I felt like the transitions in the third act weren't as crisp. It felt very delayed. Rob, did you kind of get any of that?
Um, yeah, I think it seemed a little bit fast and loose how some of the science works of that, of like that spreading, fissure in the ground. Um, when we kind of just want, okay, like we're building towards the battle, like obviously we know that Superman's gonna go ahead and save the day, so like let's just go ahead and let's just get on with it already. Like let's go ahead and cut the drama, like the fake drama of waiting to see when he's going to show up, and let's just get him here.
Right, exactly. I did enjoy his speech to Luther. I thought that was I thought that was well done too. Um One of the things I didn't like though is, you know, Luther's an intelligent guy, but he's not indestructible. And I thought him getting thrown around by Crypto. Now, maybe you can say that Crypto knows just how hard to throw him so he doesn't break him,
It doesn't
but
seem that way
he
though.
gets his ass flung around. Like, yeah, I'm like, yo, how does this guy not have like a broken leg, a broken arm? Like, he just seemed a little too clean. Um, like for being tossed around the way that he was. I didn't care for that.
Yeah, he almost went straight up Hulk on Loki from the first Avengers movie. Like it was, he was getting messed up. Probably should have. I don't think he would have been able to walk or eat solid food.
Right. Exactly. Now, I will say though, fantastic job. Loved Crypto. Thought he was
I
great.
had no idea coming into this how much of this movie like Crypto was in. I mean, we talked about some of these other side characters, these supporting roles. Man, Crypto is like heavily featured in this movie, and we've getting to things we've never seen. We've never seen that. Like, um, I can't think of any Superman media other than the actual comics and maybe some of the video games, like the Lego ones, where Crypto is even acknowledged as like a thing. So I thought that was, even from the first trailer when we saw that, I was like, what? Okay, like let's see what happens. And again, because of the tone that Gunn chose for this movie, it works. Like it just weirdly works.
Yeah, no, it definitely worked. I thought he was, I thought he was well done. I thought, character wise, he was used in good situations. I didn't feel like, you could get into the danger of potentially Crypto being a MacGuffin, kind of like he just is there when he needs to be,
Yeah.
but I thought his interactions in the movie were well placed. They made sense. Um, I do like the fact that he's Supergirl's dog. I did not expect that. I like that towards the end of the not towards the end, at the end of the movie. Um, I did enjoy that. I thought that was a surprisingly great addition to this movie. One other thing that I will say again, And I know he gets a lot of slack for this. I never particularly cared about this aspect of it. And it's universe to universe, and but the color palette, the brightness, you know, I thought this movie, for what it was, minus again a few scenes here and there, this is a very well shot movie. Color palette on this, I think, is absolutely amazing. I liked how bright and alive this movie felt.
It would have the way this film was portrayed would have. I mean, imagine trying to like throw an AI filter and say, "Hey, make this look like Zack Snyder's version of DC." How crazy would that have looked against sort of the fun, the humor, the overall just tone, the hope of this movie, with that kind of darkness behind it. It just, yeah, I was really thinking a lot about that too. Yeah, it fits. It's like good technical choices throughout.
Yes, no, I thought it was very well done in that aspect. And again, I think there is a very strong foundation here. To go on and go to these next movies. And the thing that I will be very interested, as like a kind of overall thought, is I will be very interested just to kind of see how he balances the other characters in this, because he says everything is connected, and Creature Commandos has come out, and that's part of this universe. Like, everything is going to be part of this universe. So as long as he can do it, actors who voice, animated projects are going to be, you know, preferably the main characters and things like that. They'll be on screen. Um, it'll be interesting to see how his worlds come together, because not that it has to be dark, especially with the first movie that he's going to do, but how does your version, DCU Batman, come into Superman's world? How, is Batman tonally dark? How is he going to fit those things together to eventually have a movie where these characters have to come together? That is one thing that I'll be very much looking forward to, is how will he balance what is supposed to be kind of more darker and more lighthearted characters.
Yeah. Is he going to go full like Batman in the blue in the 1966 camp kind of pow bang? Like that's really the most recent time we've had an interpretation of Batman that was anything but pitch black dark, and not even just Batman, his villains. Try to imagine Joker as anything like the Mark Hamill interpretation is like so good. And if um, we just have seen like that variation. We're going to pretend the Jared Leto version doesn't exist for a second, as we all should. Although I don't, it's actually probably better than I think sometimes the hate that gets heaped on it. The Heath Ledger version, of course, is going to be forever an iconic performance. How do you do Joker? How do you do somebody like Victor Zsasz? How do you do somebody like Bane? Like so many of Batman's rogues galleries don't work well, bright, hopeful, optimistic, funny. Like they really don't work.
Yeah, no, that's going to be a tough. I think that'll be a tough challenge. But again, because of what he's done so far and things that he said, I'm looking forward to it, and I trust him to do it as long as the studio lets him stick out his vision.
He'll probably give us like Condiment
This
Man or
movie
something.
was right, right. Like, this movie, for as much as some people do want to say, um, oh well, look at how much money it made, or didn't make, and Man of Steel made more money than this. The simple fact of the matter is, In this day and age, superhero movies are not making as much as they did, but this was a success. It was it as big a success as maybe some people wanted it to be or were hoping for? No, but the simple fact of the matter is, again, we movie wise, relatively speaking, here, we're in a world where somebody wants to say something bad about a movie making $125 million in profits. Like, it's laughable and absurd to think that there's people out there going, yeah, but it only did $615 million worldwide. Like Man of Steel did 827. Okay, well, guess what? Marvel was at one point a juggernaut, and $1 billion was expected.
What year
Like,
did Man of Steel
it's
come
just
out?
not how it. Uh, was it 24? No, 2014. Was it? When did that come
For some
out?
reason, I'm thinking like 2009 sticks out in my head, but I mean, trying to compare what people are paying money to see at the box office
2000,
today.
2013.
Okay. It, what people want to see in the theaters today compared to then, uh, I don't know that you can necessarily compare those things. I think not that streaming didn't exist at that time, but um, it's a different world. The way people consume media is very different, and um, economically, there's a lot of different factors too. So I think anybody that wants to just look at box office and try to compare it um, to previous releases of DC characters, I just don't know that you can. I don't know that you can do that in a way that if you're going to try to do that in a way to make this movie seem lesser than, I just don't think it's a fair comparison.
No, not at all. I don't think it is. And my number was off, so I apologize. For Man of Steel, still Man of Steel made a little bit more money than this one did, but it's not a fair comparison. This movie was profitable. And it had 13 million views in its first 10 days. That's a lot of views. That's insane. It's a lot of people going on watching this movie. Um, so this is a success. Whether or not you like the movie, didn't like the movie, the simple fact of the matter is this is a success. And for the most part, yeah, this movie is liked. Do I think there are some things wrong with it? Yes. Is it a bad movie? No, absolutely not. This is good. Um, overall, this is a good movie. My issues with standing, I can't deny my initial feeling watching this and being hooked. Um, it brought it back, so I'm not going to say a 25-minute chunk of the movie ruins it for me. Some movies have. This movie did not. Um, but this is a success, and it's a great way to start. For the most part, I think season 2 of Peacemaker has been seen as a success. I think we're going to get some pretty big reveals here in the next, I believe, 2 episodes to finish off season 2 of Peacemaker. And then realistically, it's, you know, what comes next? I mean, Clayface is the next thing coming out. That's going to be big picture wise, and that's going to be interesting because again, we're going for a shift. The Clayface is going to be a totally different shift from what Superman was. So how that movie is going to be portrayed, you know, what that's going to need to be considered successful, is going to be interesting. But I am excited for it.
Yeah, Clayface, a B tier Batman villain, as the next thing they're doing. It's an interesting choice.
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly seen this work. You mentioned Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians of the Galaxy were not a well-known property. That was a risk. And granted, it's a totally different movie than what Clayface is going to be, but Guardians of the Galaxy is a risk when Marvel allowed James Gunn to do that, regardless of the success that they were having. Um, who knows them? who really knows Guardians of the Galaxy when you were going out to the theater or this was announced? Not saying Clayface will be that, but under the right circumstances, an unknown can become an undeniable. And, that's what Guardians of the Galaxy became under James Gunn. They became an undeniable success. So, it can happen.
And I was right there with that. When that movie got announced, I was like, what? And I'm a nerd. And I went, who? What? There's a talking raccoon and a tree that only says his name? The hell is this? And I really thought in my head, this could be Marvel's first miss. Like I remember like really thinking like, wow, that's not going to make any money. Now, it's made 3 films, and probably one of the biggest rides at at Disney World is the Guardians of the Galaxy ride, and it's this crazy huge mega property now, that the Guardians is like this major, factor for Marvel, and those characters on their own are important, and people want to see more of them. So yeah, I think when you give the right filmmaker the right tools and the right amount of leash with the right script and the right cast, you can do some pretty amazing things with a property nobody's ever heard of before. And Clayface is certainly somebody we know who he is. We have an idea. There's some interesting things there. I mean, there was a bit of time where Clayface was actually kind of an unofficial member of the Bat family. Like he's got some depth to him that with the right voice actor, and I guess you could also do him physically as well. That could actually be really good. That could be an unexpected hit.
Yeah, no, I think this could be a very interesting time. Um, Looking forward to seeing what will come from this DCU. Um, Rob, any final thoughts on this movie?
A quick one. The part where you actually see the monkeys typing in all the hate messages into all the social media sites, like behind the scenes that Luther's doing, was so funny to me because I think that's how it works in real life. Anyways, most of the time, if you're arguing with somebody online that you don't actually know person to person, there's a good chance it's just a bot. And I just thought that was so funny.
Yeah, no, I'm convinced that's
I,
actually
I
how it
think that
goes.
was real. I don't think that was. I don't even think that was VFX. I think that they just found where that farm is and they just shot it. I think that's real.
Right, so somebody had like those Amazon glasses on that film, and they like just
Yes,
spliced it into the
yes.
movie.
I'm pretty sure that was real.
So, yeah, no, I think very good first outing. Was pleasantly surprised with this movie, and looking forward to future DCU projects. So, that'll wrap up this episode here, and you know, for the rest of the month, I'm hoping, with it being October, my favorite genre of movies, I'm hoping to do a couple of horror reviews in here. Rob will kind of discuss that off air if you're able to join some of those for some of the movies that I have picked
Oh, I
out.
have a suggestion.
And we'll go. Oh, go ahead,
You
give
want
that
you want
right
me to
now.
just do it live? All right. So we've covered. I'll let you try to guess it. We've covered 2/3 of it so far. You
28
got it.
years later.
Nailed it.
All right.
It's on Netflix right now.
Well, it is on Netflix right now. It is a dong of a movie. I wait, no, I'm sorry. There's just a lot of dongs out in that movie is what I meant to say. I actually have that on the list as one of the ones
Ooh,
that I wanted to do. So yes, let's make that a reality. I think that'll be a very interesting one to talk about because I know how you and I feel about the first two. And I am going to be insanely curious how you feel about this one. I think this one is much more divisive than the first two movies in terms of what people think of it. So, yeah, that'll be the first one that we will hit for horror movies in October. So, I'm glad you
can't
spoke
wait.
up. All right. Well, again, listeners, when you go into the show notes, you will find every single thing you need to contact the show, how to see our other episodes. So I want to say thank you once again for joining us. This has been Matt Goes to the Movies, and we will see you next time.